Scan your head like you're a cashier and I'm a bunch of bananas. I'm not bananas, you are.
That's not really funny to people who've lost their kids to this vaccine. How dare you be so flippant, man?
I want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg because I got so many texts this week because she attacked me the week before. Sure. So everybody was like, oh, Bill, I get you're enjoying the karma. First of all, I'm going to talk about this at the end of my show next week, teaser.
Looks like Bill Maher is back in full demolition mode, tearing into trendy woke, talking points like it's a personal sport. And this time, the spotlight lands squarely on Whoopi Goldberg, a clash that honestly felt inevitable after years of headline-making, secondhand embarrassing remarks stacking up since 2022, because Maher didn't just disagree with her latest take. He broke it down piece by piece, stripping away every weak argument and exposing every shaky moment in a blistering verbal takedown that played out more like a public roast than a calm discussion, leaving Whoopi ducking the fallout like a cartoon character dodging disaster from every direction. And now the big question is simple. What exactly did she say this time that pushed Maher into full no-filter mode? And how did his razor-sharp clapback manage to flip the entire narrative and stun the outraged crowd in one brutal sweep? Stick with us, because we got every spicy detail lined up. And trust me, this isn't just another celebrity spat. It's a wild culture war roller coaster with no brakes and absolutely no seatbelts.
Everyone knows Corona is no walk in the park, because you literally can't walk in the park. But at some point, the daily drumbeat of depression and terror veers into panic porn. Enough with the life will never be the same headlines. And stop showing us this. You know, everything looks scary when you magnify it 1,000 times. Here's a pubic hair. Boom!
Looks like Whoopi Goldberg has officially poked the bear, and now she's staring straight into the claws of some very uncomfortable truth. Because after what went down in our last video, where Bill Maher absolutely tore apart Sonny Hostin for twisting his words on The View, it's clear the panel wasn't about to quietly accept the loss. And this time the counterattack comes in the form of Whoopi herself, stepping into the spotlight like she's on a full-blown revenge mission to reclaim their pride. And hit back just as hard, because when Sonny couldn't survive the heat Maher brought to the table, the so-called backup got called in, and Whoopi stormed onto battlefield fired up, confrontational, and ready to throw down like an overhyped reality show challenger nobody asked for, turning what could have been a simple rebuttal into a loud, dramatic showdown that instantly set the culture war crowd on edge.
That's not really funny to people who've lost their kids to this vaccine, or people who've lost family members or dear friends to this. This is what we're doing to protect our families. And you don't have to do it, but stay away from everybody. Because if you're the one who's not paying attention and you're coughing and sneezing, you don't want to then stay out of the public, man. This is not, nobody wants this. And I think he's forgetting that people are still at risk who cannot get vaccinated. People who can't get that. Little kids under the age of 5. Yeah. Or people with health conditions. How dare you be so flippant, man?
Classic Whoopi Goldberg. Flipping through the same tired culture war playbook like it's sacred scripture. When your arguments start sinking fast, build a straw man and swing at that instead. But the problem is, Bill Maher was making a crystal clear point about what everyday black Americans actually care about. Better jobs, a stronger economy, and policing that's fair and responsible, simple, grounded, and hard to misread. Yet somehow Whoopi veered off into a rambling detour about voting for a former prosecutor and vague promises of the working class, as if that had anything to do with the point on the table. And no, there's no hidden logic to connect the dots here, because the dots aren't even on the same page. It's more like tossing arguments at a wall in the dark and hoping something sticks. Spoiler alert, nothing does. And Maher wasn't about to let that kind of dodge and deflect routine slide without calling out loud and clear.
Saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View is karma. There's no such thing as karma, sorry. No. Sorry, but life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hilarious.
Bill Maher didn't bother sugarcoating a single word. He flat out signaled that Whoopi Goldberg's talking points made little real-world sense. And honestly, that brand of fuzzy logic has become almost routine on The View, a show that now feels less like a political discussion panel and more like a slow-motion media pileup painful to witness, yet weirdly impossible to tear away from, because while it's built a reputation on bold, controversial, and often head-scratching opinions, the chaos seems to reach a whole new level whenever Sunny Hostin and Whoopi take the lead, stacking dramatic claims and overblown reactions into a non-stop spectacle that turns debate into pure theater. And if you need proof of how surreal it's become, just remember the moment Charlemagne the God sat in as a guest, looking like someone who'd accidentally walked through a portal into an alternate reality where common sense took the day off.
Holocaust isn't about race. It's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Here's the backstory. President Joe Biden, who often talks about no one being above the law, just turned around and dropped the presidential pardon on his son, Hunter Biden, even after Hunter was found guilty of corruption and related charges. I mean, talk about reality twist. How do you preach that mantra of accountability when your own kid walks away with a clean slate? It's basically saying justice only works if the last name isn't Biden. Blind justice, sure, but with one eye open. Hunter's guilt was about as subtle as cookie crumbs on a toddler's shirt, yet somehow accountability didn't get put on the family calendar. That was exactly Charlemagne the God's gripe. If the woke crowd really insists that no one is above the law, then that rule should apply evenly, no exceptions, no special treatment. Simple concept, right? Well, not in
American experience tends to be based on skin.
Yes. And so that is what race means to me. When you talk about being a racist, I was saying you can't call this racism. This was evil. This wasn't based on the skin. You couldn't tell who was Jewish. They had to delve deeply to figure it out.
And there you have it. Another eye-rolling, headline-ready moment from the self-appointed queen of cringe, Whoopi Goldberg, because this time she seriously tried to argue that Joe Biden never misled anyone when he declared that no one is above the law. Really, Whoopi? Because the internet is basically buried under clips, interviews, and public statements where that exact line gets repeated loud and clear, so pretending it never happened feels less like honest debate and more like rewriting history on live television. And at this point, the receipts aren't subtle. They're stacked sky high in video, audio, and archival proof, making her defense sound less like a fact check and more like a last-second scramble to protect a narrative that simply doesn't survive contact with reality.
Whoopi Goldberg, who, by the way, I hope is still a friend, we can disagree with each other, should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Watching Whoopi Goldberg defend a straight-up contradiction felt like watching someone confidently insist the sky isn't blue while standing under a crystal-clear afternoon sun. At this point, her mental gymnastics deserve an Olympic medal. Even as she'd probably trip over her own logic halfway through routine, and you could practically see the disbelief freeze across Charlemagne the God's face as her claims kept rolling in, because she didn't just stop at brushing off the obvious. She went a step further and suggested that Joe Biden might have simply changed his mind after getting tired being pushed around, a move that sounded less like a serious explanation and more like a last-second plot twist no one asked for. And the moment she dropped that line, Charlemagne wasn't clapping back, wasn't interrupting, wasn't even reacting. He was flat out stunned into silence, as if the logic gap in front of him was too big to jump without a parachute.
Well, I had a different question, but it struck me that in the first segment you used the term woke, and you said that woke is what was sort of ruining everything. And I know that you're...
No, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump could get reelected.
Now, I know you've seen this clip a million times, so we won't bore you with the full version. But here's something to pay attention to.
They don't have to bend over backward like that. And that's exactly the problem with the so-called outrage crowd. Accountability only matters when the person in trouble isn't part of their own inner circle. But the moment one of their favorites gets caught, the public fury magically turns into soft excuses,
and then on
selective
Tuesday,
memory, and nervous silence. And that's how Whoopi Goldberg and her media allies managed to skate past yet another awkward moment on air, mostly because the pushback came from Charlemagne the God, who kept it measured and restrained. But once Bill Maher caught wind of the whole routine, the gloves came off, the filter disappeared, and what followed wasn't a polite disagreement. It was a ruthless, no-mercy verbal dismantling that sliced straight through the double standards and delivered one of the sharpest on-air takedowns we've seen in a long time.
I had any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left, watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas, that straightened me up pretty quick.
Honestly, Bill Maher nailed it. Because the self-styled outrage crowd loves to present itself as society's final judge and moral referee. Yet this time their double standard was impossible to hide, since Hunter Biden's guilt was about as clear as it gets. But thanks to the fact that his father happens to be Joe Biden, the consequences suddenly vanished into thin air, and instead of the usual public pile-on, we got soft excuses and awkward silence. Because if this had been anyone outside their protected circle, the calls for punishment would have been loud, relentless, and merciless. Yet when it's one of their own, justice quietly steps aside for loyalty, favoritism, and political convenience, which is exactly why Maher called the whole spectacle what it really is, a polished, media-friendly farce. And the uncomfortable truth behind his takedown isn't just about one name or one family. It's about a system that bends over backward for the powerful while throwing the rule book at everyone. Else, turning his on-air smackdown into more than commentary. It became a wake-up call for anyone still clinging to the fantasy of equal treatment. And here's where things get even messier, because Maher also pointed out that this outrage machine doesn't run alone. It often gets quietly fueled, amplified, and protected by the very mainstream media outlets that claim to hold everyone accountable.
This should be against the law. You should not be able to lie to the American knowingly. What do we do as Americans to say this is not okay?
You'd have to hide the First Amendment.
I think you,
the First Amendment doesn't allow you to willingly.
The press went into full spin doctor mode, scrambling to shrink and sanitize the fallout around Hunter Biden, quietly shielding Joe Biden while clearing political airspace to slow down Donald Trump's return, as heavyweight news outlets waved the story away with a tired foreign disinformation label. Even while fresh revelations kept surfacing, and anyone who pushed back was pushed out of conversation. And over on The View, Whoopi Goldberg leaned all the way in, brushing off the accusations, with sarcastic smirks like the entire controversy was beneath serious discussion. But Bill Maher wasn't buying a single second of it. He cut straight through media-friendly excuses, torched the defensive talking points, and dragged the focus back to the real issue, exposing how protecting a storyline had quietly replaced the search for truth and putting the double standard culture on full display for everyone watching at home.
I gave the commencement address at Berkeley. Someone has to check in with the people who tried to have my speech canceled and make sure they made it through okay.
Bill Maher was absolutely on target, because the panel on The View, especially Whoopi Goldberg, doesn't just come across as aggressively woke. It feels more like a tight circle of ideological enforcers, circling anyone who dares step out of line, and ready to tear into them the moment their worldview is challenged. And the problem isn't debate. It's that real discussion and honest disagreement never seem to be the goal, since their style of argument relies far more on mockery, dismissal, and social pressure than facts or open-minded exchange, with Whoopi in particular mastering the art of brushing off opposing voices with a casual wave and a sarcastic tone, as if different opinions don't even deserve oxygen. But Maher wasn't intimidated by the attitude or the audience. He pulled the curtain back on their playbook, exposed the pressure tactics for what they really are, and called out the way moral posturing gets used as a shield for straight-up bullying, which is exactly why he's become such a thorn in their side, consistently highlighting the double standards and selective outrage that so many viewers are tired of watching. And honestly, in a media space packed with recycled talking points and one-directional narratives, Maher's takedowns land like a rare breath of fresh air in a room full of stale arguments.
Seems to be a lot of talk about the dessert I requested for my birthday show.
The place that made these refused to make them for me. They said that their ovens had gone down, all kinds of stuff. Perhaps they did not like my politics.
Bill Maher says it's time for the outraged crowd to stop clutching their pearls over Donald Trump's victory and start dealing with uncomfortable reality. He didn't steal it, hack it, or magically summon it out of thin air. He won because millions of Americans actually bought into what he was offering, no matter how much that reality makes a progressive left grind its teeth, and instead of endlessly blaming shadowy villains, foreign interference, racism, or whatever convenient scapegoat happens to be trending on Twitter this week, Maher argues a smarter move is to accept a basic rule of democracy. Sometimes the other side wins. And that isn't a malfunction. It's the system doing exactly what it was built to do. Because if they really want a serious shot in 2028 or even 2032, they'll need to drop the permanent victim routine, stop rewriting the scoreboard, and start acting like strategists instead of spectators yelling at the referee.
People up at 3 or 4 o'clock every morning. The sacrifices they've made, the holidays they've missed with their families. To make Staten Island better, they have sacrificed for 145 years. And frankly, the people who defamed the Holterman family should apologize to the Holterman family for making stuff up to suit their needs. Not everybody wakes up every day and thinks about politics. A good business person doesn't care about anybody's politics.
Once again, Bill Maher cut straight through the noise, pointing out that not everyone who voted for Donald Trump is waving flags at backyard MAGA rallies or bowing to golden statues. Many people simply held their breath and voted because they were exhausted by the Democrats' preachy tone and the woke crowd's growing disconnect from everyday common sense. And let's be honest, when a movement starts applauding biological males competing in women's sports or hosting protests that come across as uncomfortably soft toward groups like Hamas, it shouldn't be shocked when a serious chunk of the middle quietly walks away, because most voters didn't back Trump for his tweets, his attitude, or his orange glow. They did it because the other option felt like being trapped in a moral lecture from a smug vegan at a backyard barbecue. And Maher's real warning to the left is simple and brutal. If you actually want to win again, stop chasing every fringe idea in the activist playbook. Stop pushing away normal voters in the middle, and start focusing on policies and priorities that actually make sense to the average American watching all of this from the sidelines.
I appreciate that people are having a hard time. Me too.
Yeah.
I work for a living. If I had all the money in the world, I would not be here. I literally just work here.
Yep, pure comedy gold. Because Bill Maher didn't just land a final punch on Whoopi Goldberg. He practically built the entire takedown from scratch while laughing at how absurd the whole situation had become. After Whoopi, playing the self-styled guardian of the woke crowd, decided to take a swing at him for the unforgivable crime of thinking for himself, a move that turned out to be a spectacular miscalculation, because Maher fired back in classic form, razor-sharp, unapologetic, and brutally. Funny, calling out the delicious irony of being attacked for having an opinion by a co-host of View, a program that literally brands itself as a home for different perspectives, only to recoil the moment a viewpoint shows up that doesn't match their script, which makes the constant preaching about tolerance sound a little rich, when it clearly seems to mean tolerating only their own ideas, and Maher, as usual, wasn't buying any of it. He ripped the mask off the cozy echo chamber Whoopi and her crew operate in, where group loyalty replaces critical thinking and disagreement is treated like a moral crime, and watching him shred those paper-thin arguments felt less like a debate and more like a masterclass in sarcastic precision and cold, logical timing. So with that, we're closing the curtain on today's episode. And if you enjoyed the breakdown, hit like, subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next one.